Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm Brian Doyle here with you today, but I've got a very special guest joining me, and many of you may know him throughout the channel, especially if you've been on the show circuit a bit. But I want to introduce to you today George Smith from Augment. How are you doing today, George?
Hey, Brian. Very well. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. It's always fun getting to chat with you and learning a little bit more about the world of Microsoft. But before we go into, some of that world and some of the things that we'll be discussing today, maybe share with those that don't know you a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the world of MSP.
Yeah, sure. So I guess as so many of us find ourselves, I kind of fell into the channel, I think is the expression a lot of people use. I worked at a Canadian MSP, or what I call an accidental MSP. It was a software development agency that loved doing custom websites, custom software projects. And when I joined as their business development officer, I was tasked with kind of holistically growing the business. And one of the things I identified was, managed services, offering maintenance contracts, developing recurring revenue, and actually beginning to specialize in the vertical of healthcare. So I spent about 4 years there. I had a great time, and then had the opportunity to work at Augment in its first year. So truly a startup, and that was something I always wanted to do, get involved in a tech startup. Huge opportunity for learning and growth, and been very fortunate to work with Gavin, Garbutt and Belair, the guys who started Enable back in the day. And here we are 3.5 years later.
That's awesome. And I think some of what comes out there too is it's great when you've got people that have transitioned to the vendor side that have spent time in the MSP space as well. I think a lot of customers are really kind of evaluating that these days and saying, "Hey, do you really know what we do? Do you understand what we do?" So, kudos that you spent some time there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Augment, so folks have an understanding of what that's all about?
For sure. So for anyone who hasn't heard of Augment, we're a Canadian company that exclusively works with MSPs. Our platform is MSP centric, and the problem that we're really fixing is that of the M365 problem for MSPs. So we all know Microsoft is an incredibly complex labyrinth of an ecosystem. And in a nutshell, what we're doing is helping MSPs secure and manage the M365 environment. The reason why that's important, Brian, is because, as you know, as many MSPs know, M365 is not secure out of the box. And that's something that a lot of SMB clients probably don't realize. So we have to help them understand that there's work to be done to harden that environment, and MSPs want to get paid for that work. But also for MSPs who are managing multiple tenants, Microsoft isn't natively multi-tenant, and so it can be an incredibly cumbersome, manually intensive job to go tenant by tenant by tenant, to do check by check by check. And so by the time you've done your third or fourth tenant out of 15 or 20, you probably have to go back to the first guy that you did on Monday morning to make sure everything is still in place. So with Augment, we're helping MSPs simplify that by using a combination of dashboards, including our security posture, which we have templates for now. So you can apply those security best practices with the click of a button, really build that wall, that security wall, harden the environment. And then if and when bad things happen, we have alerts to be able to notify MSPs of suspicious activity and risky behaviors, and then again, remediate those with the click of a button. So all about simplifying M365 security.
Yeah, and it's amazing, when you really look at how everything's gone so cloud first. And at this stage, with the majority of the customers not only just leveraging Microsoft for email services, but expanding out to Teams, SharePoint, and so many other services, getting that management capability is really critical. Security has become much more concerning over, from that standpoint. And to your point, as another vendor who integrates with Microsoft to a touch, there is so much data that comes in through that graph, just, API through those systems, just filtering it all and understanding what's important and what's not can be challenging. So, it's certainly great that there's partners like Augment out there that can really help their MSPs do that. But I want to kick off a little bit of our discussion today with something you and I were talking about briefly before our call. And you were talking a little bit about, technician efficiency. And one of the challenges that, MSP owners have is when we're bringing on new hires, can that new hire really step in and do the job? Because we ask so much of them in this industry. We all run lean, right? So we need to have guys that are able to do things beyond probably their skill set right from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's not just, I mean, there's different layers to this, right, Brian? I always make the joke that even any new hire that we have at Augment, I'm like, okay, my hot tip for you is you're going to open a Word document or a notepad, and it's just going to be titled acronyms, because there's going to be a ton of letters that get thrown
Alphabet
your
soup.
way. That will be alphabet soup, right? That you will never have heard of before. And people are going to be talking about CIS protocols and how you can implement them with the RMM and see them in your PSA. And that's going to go over your head if you haven't been in this space before. So make sure you write those out and get familiar with them. And that's just broadly speaking. Whenever we put a more technical lens over it, if you can think of yourself as a 19 or 21-year-old coming into this space fresh out of school. Maybe you have some technical experience and background, you have a passion for IT, but all of a sudden you're put in that L1 technical chair, and you have an RMM, a PSA, a backup, in most cases well over a dozen different, very niche, very specific software tools that are by nature multi-tenant because of the business you're in, and you're just expected to be able to know how they work, how they talk to each other, if they talk to each other, and how they're meant to help you do your job. So I think there's a huge onus on senior technicians, on owners, to make sure that junior or entry-level technicians are onboarded and helped to make their life as easy as possible, but also on the vendor side as well, right? To make sure that we're making it easy for MSPs at large, just making their life easy to use the tools that we're providing to them through training, through onboarding, by listening to their feedback, by reacting to some of the things that they're asking for, be it technical enhancements or go-to-market materials.
Yeah, I mean, that onboarding piece is always a challenge for the MSP, because usually they're, especially when they're still in that stage of scaling up and really getting out to market or getting to that next level, people tend to be stretched, right? And one of the things that can be sacrificed there is some of the hand-holding you have with a new employee. So, certainly putting together policies and procedures. I love that idea of just having them track acronyms and doing a daily check-in, like, what didn't you understand that you heard today? Those are things that would really help accelerate somebody that's getting started and make them successful. One of the things I used to say to a lot of my hires when we brought them on is, look, you're not expected to know everything, but you're going to learn more than you ever would if you were sitting in a corporate seat responsible for one type of technology. And that exposure will really help connect the dots for you long term. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to tell us where you need support, because we're not mind readers and we may not know. So, I think there's a lot of maturing MSPs that have really built nice service delivery onboarding capabilities. But the reality is a lot of these techs are being put in the seat and go, here's all the tools. Explore, figure out how you're going to make them work. They're asking their fellow techs when they're between calls, right?
You're absolutely right, Brian. It's so important to foster that environment of trust and helpfulness, and make sure that people feel okay to be able to ask for help and not feel ridiculed or be embarrassed by it. There's in a previous life, I used to work at a summer camp, and we used to have to do swim tests. And I used to always remember saying, look, if anyone can't swim, now is the time to let us know, because we can help you. Please do not be that kid that is freaking out right now, can't swim, has to do this swim test, and just jumps in the water. And every year, Brian, there was one kid, couldn't swim, didn't want to make a big fuss of it. But then when all the kids jump in the water and start doing their swim test, they would just sink. And you're looking there going, okay, they're going to come. Whereas, if we'd known in advance, we can be more helpful. So that rule applies to across the business board, I think, is people don't mind if you can't swim and you let them know. They mind whenever you're drowning and didn't tell them that you couldn't swim.
So now, let's kind of pivot that to how Augment helps, right? You had mentioned that, one of the things that you're trying to do is bring some of the training in, but you had also mentioned that there are some tools really within the tooling that can help a junior person get started, or a junior person do really probably level 2 tasks because they're automated within the platform. Maybe you can speak a little bit to some of those capabilities.
Yeah, I think it's technicians across the board. So if we start with a junior tech, or even someone who's not technical, anyone in the office, they can hop into Augment and really begin to help out with some of the most common tickets that come through from Microsoft. Because again, with the click of a button, you can do things like reset a password, onboard, offboard, turn MFA on, change someone's license. All that kind of thing is really, really helpful to be able to spread the load and also empower other staff. So now you can have an office administrator or a salesperson begin to resolve those tickets. You can have an intern who's maybe only with you for, 2 or 3 months in the summer. What am I going to get this kid to do by the time I set them up? And they're going, hey, we'll set you up in Augment. If any of these 7 things happen, you click this button, you resolve the ticket, you log it here. That's a good job. That's you. That's what success is for you. And we'll give you a glowing review, right? Having the ability to equip other people that need very specific information. The example I like to use is at the end of every month, there's probably someone in operations or finance that wants to know, what is the status of our Microsoft licensing? We're an MSP, we've got CSP, how many licenses do we have? How are those split up across the tenants? Who has what? And what do you think they do, Brian? They don't have access to that. They're not savvy in the dark arts of the Microsoft portal. What do? They kick it to a technician, and some poor technician has to go and pull all that stuff manually. With Augment, we built that feature based on direct partner feedback. They said, hey, we like what you guys are doing. One of the things that would be super helpful in terms of bringing multi-tenancy to the M365 ecosystem is that license report, where we can see, at a high level where all the licenses are assigned, drill into each tenant, see who has got what, see how that's changed over time, see what's left over, how we can reassign all that information in a nice neat dashboard, so that whenever our head of finance or CFO wants that information, we can just click a button and send that to them. But I think, more generally speaking, if you think of life as an MSP technician, and Brian, maybe you've been there yourself, there's a lot of noise happening all the time, right? Like maybe you work with the SOC, and so there's periods during the day where the SOC says, hey, this thing's happening, we're escalating this to you, like you should definitely be aware of this and check this out. So there's one bell ringing over there. Then you've got L1 technicians or those junior guys saying, look, I've done all I can with this ticket that's come through, Brian. Like, I'm escalating it to you because I don't have the technical prowess to be able to resolve it. That's why you get paid the big bucks, over to you. Then you've got sales guys who are like, Brian, like, I need some of this technical information. These guys have questions. Like, can I get this report? Can you add this thing in this slide in this PowerPoint? And then to my point as well, you've also got people in finance or operations that want to know some of the internal, own IT stuff. So there's a lot of noise happening. So being able to quickly gather that information, or indeed just say, hey guys, like, it's in Augment, go to this dashboard, export a report to a PDF, email it to yourself, however you want to download that information. It's accessible to you, and I actually don't need to give you all the answers and all the keys to the kingdom of M365. We'll just set you up an Augment and you cherry pick what you need.
Yeah, and I think the ease of some of the tools that are coming into the market today and getting those people that information quickly and in a shareable format is critical, because you're spot on. There are balls coming from all directions, and you're just batting them off all day long, and it can be challenging. And, some of those things are really important too. When you look at licensing, obviously it's always to your benefit to be able to show a customer when they might be over licensed and potentially come down, but you could also be leaving revenue on the table, growing your MSP as well. And that really can eat into margin when you're not getting the right license counts in there, because you're purely paying 100% of that customer's freight at that point in time. So great stuff. Now, you were also, you had said a very profound quote earlier today. So, I don't want it to steal your thunder, but let's talk a little bit about how you view kind of the vendor community and what we should be doing as a group to kind of help our clients.
Oh, right. Yes. The quote, I was like, I forget what quote we were before this. Yeah, I've been kind of using the quote a lot, like educate to proliferate. Recently, it's nice because it kind of rhymes a little bit, so it's memorable. But I think it's just getting behind the idea that technology is moving so rapidly, even for people who are in the technical space. Like, there's just so much new stuff coming out. It's very, very exciting, but it's also worrying, because we know everyone wants to talk about AI, and that it can do a lot of good stuff, can also do a lot of bad stuff, right? Yeah. So even within the channel and the IT community, things are getting a little crazy. So imagine what it's like at the SMB level, where someone's just trying to run their shop or a retail store or a factory, and they want to outsource IT. So I think it's really, really important for we in the channel, as vendors, as MSPs, everyone within that ecosystem, to start leveling up our education practices of how we're helping ensure, our SMB clients kind of understand where some of the threats are, the value that MSPs provide, and most importantly, why it's important. Like raising that digital IQ has to be, a real focus point for MSPs, I think, in this modern digital era, because if you're working with a lot of non-technical clients, that's just going to create more and more problems for you, because they're going to be higher risk. You're going to be having more and more difficult conversations around why they're paying for stuff all the time. So it's worth your while as an MSP, I think, to help your clients understand some of the digital best practices that we all need to level up on.
Yeah, I think, thought leadership all around is critical these days. One, to just help spread the word so people can stay vigilant from a security perspective. But when you think about it, even bigger picture, sales is a different animal today. And we talk about that a lot on the podcast. And, the days of fully just picking up a phone call, making 100 dials, knowing you're going to speak to 30 people and you're going to, get 3 or 4 appointments, those days are long gone. And thought leadership is becoming one of the biggest tools to not only help educate people to what you do, but also provide them the information so they know, like, and trust you when they engage you as well. And you'll see that the vendors that are doing a really good job of kind of sharing that information tend to be the ones that are on the tip of the tongue of their customers. And MSPs can do the same thing in their region, by approaching that same piece of it. So I love that concept of educate and proliferate. That's a great statement.
Yeah, I think it's just important for to acknowledge how difficult it is in this day and age to be an MSP and to be selling to clients, right? Like it's incredibly tricky, and getting into those conversations where suddenly maybe everyone thinks they're an expert on IT. And the other challenge is, something that's maybe not talked about as often as it should, is there's no standardization within managed services. Brian, you and I could spin up a business name and call ourselves an MSP tomorrow, and then all of a sudden go undercut people in our neighborhoods. And that's a challenge I think MSPs face is, how do you compete against the bargain bucket MSP that's undercutting you on price? And if you haven't established, one, that trust, and two, that education that then bleeds into the value that you provide, it becomes really, really challenging to justify why you're double the price of someone else if your clients don't really understand what it is you do and how you're helping them.
Yeah, I mean, it is so difficult that way. And there's so much noise coming at the customer as well. It's important for us to be kind of that point that can funnel through that noise when we do get to that advisor role that most MSPs roll into. And I think that kind of dovetails into another part that you and I were talking about pre-interview, raising the technical IQ of those that are in the marketplace. It's, I think you had a very interesting story around phishing that I think you might want to share and kind of help level set this discussion for our listeners.
Yeah, so this isn't actually my story. It was another chat I was having with a former MSP that suffered, a ransomware attack on one of their clients back in 2014, I think it was, and it stemmed from a phishing email. And whenever they were going through the forensics and explaining the severity of the situation to the client's CEO and owner at the time, he was a little bit perturbed because he's like, phishing email, like that's just someone's failed an IQ test at my company. And we can kind of joke about it now, but yeah, that's not a bad way to put it. And then I think that the MSP at the time was like, yeah, that's actually kind of accurate. So what are we doing to help raise the digital IQ? I mean, everyone jokes about the Nigerian prince who's got a big bag of money and just email him back. But you and I both know that here and now in 2024, it's way more sophisticated than that. And coming back to our earlier point on AI and people are using it for, productivity gains, it's the same thing for bad actors, right? Some of the things you can do with imagery, with voices, with video, to deceive people is getting really, really scary.
Yeah, I mean, when you really look at the different ways that people can kind of come in through social engineering and coming at the human piece of it, even the best of us can make mistakes at this stage, right? It's those little things like the Cyrillic, if I'm saying that correctly, language where the A looks a little bit different, but everything else looks fine in those emails. And, when you see those different ways that people get in, it's tough to say, hey, anybody failed an IQ test. I don't think we can say that anymore, but I think it's, hey, how do we get people the knowledge that they need so they can be a little bit stronger or a little bit more intelligent about what they do click on or what they do answer to or what they do respond to. And I think, all of us in the community, MSPs, vendors, organizations like CompTIA, we're all trying to bring that education out to the customers because we all benefit by the more everybody knows, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I think anything that you can do to help raise your customers' digital IQ it is helpful. And a big part of that is just understanding what they value and what their emotions are tied to, and then present data that supports whatever type of action you want them to take. That's why platforms like VCI Toolbox, like Augment, that have that data readily available and kind of make it easy to present and allow you to structure a story around, I think, are really, really powerful tools and platforms that every MSP should be leveraging.
Yep, and that goes from the end user level right back to we've come full circle back to your technician efficiency. You were mentioning earlier how Augment has pre-built policies that can be applied very easily across your entire enterprise. Those things harden the environment, so we're reducing some of the risk as well. And that's exciting to see too. Like each vendor is kind of taking their different way to help with hardening the environment, securing the environment, and then where applicable, educating the environment or educating the users as well.
Yeah, and I would say it's amazing. I was chatting with some partners the other day, and we were going through setting up the templates, and I was saying, this is a hardening project, charge for it, and they were kind of like, oh yeah, that is a good idea. I was like, it doesn't have to be much. You can charge like $500, $1,000, and just say, look, well, this is work that we're doing. They don't necessarily need to know that it's only going to take you 5 minutes because Augment makes it easy for you, but it's also attaching value to the work that you're doing. And I would say it's like, look, we are setting this baseline of security here, and we do not want it to drop below them. So, we're charging you a hardening project fee, and then here's what we're going to be charging you per month per user for this enhanced security service to make sure it stays there, because it is not a set it and forget it. And another quote, not mine, but one I love is security is a discipline, not a product. So, we have to be continuously managing and monitoring and alerting on this environment and bring it back to, particularly with Microsoft, it's a great place to start. If your Microsoft goes down, your business is over. Right.
Yeah, and I think as an industry, we're starting to get better at the concept of governance, right? We've certainly seen that come into different different frameworks out there. And this 2.0 obviously brought the governance layer in. CIS just did an update last week, which introduced governance into the version 8 as well. And really, what we're talking about here is because there's so much change, you need to continually review and see: do you have the right policies? Do you have the right procedures? Do you have the right process against all your tools? And then, as vendors, it's part of our responsibility probably to help you get there quicker, get there faster, and be looking at the things that you might not see earlier as well. And it sounds like Augment's doing that today.
Yeah, I think that's a whole can of worms in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Brian,
we could do another half hour on that very easily, right?
One thing I will say is I think there's actually a big opportunity for maybe people more on the consultant side of things, or who are maybe looking for a new niche to hone in on here, and that is around governance. So to give a story as an example, everyone's talking about Microsoft Copilot and how it can be used and how great it may or may not be. The story I like to tell is, yeah, it's great until you have an intern or junior staff says, hey, Copilot, go make me a spreadsheet of everyone's salary information, right? Is that something that you want readily available? And the problem is that what a lot of SMB companies don't understand is Copilot's just trying to do what it's told to be helpful. And unless you have some type of framework or a corporate governance in place that is informing it of what it can and can't look at and share with who and permissions, that's really what you have to build. So we call that kind of corporate IT governance. Like, that's a whole project in itself. Yeah. And I think that's something that MSPs can hone into, is like, do you have corporate IT governance? Like, do you have things listed, logged, tagged with who has permission to this, how you can see this? Because if you don't, you really shouldn't be using AI. And I think there's an opening in the market for that to be a bit of a specialization, that some type of vendor tool or consultant can come in and say, from nuts soup to nuts, like, I can do that for you. I can help you build that corporate governance and structure.
Yeah, and again, governance requires evidence, and you've got some great reports within Augment that are really helping that process and helping folks understand how, what they've done inside Microsoft. Is it violating any regulatory terms, or is it actually adhering to it? And that's critical too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you mentioned like NIST and CIS. We have a lovely little column in Augment that actually connects the dots between all of the various security postures and policies that Microsoft say should be implemented, but aren't implemented out of the box. So from the MSP side, you can clearly go in and say, okay, all these things are green, and that's ticking the box for CIS 1.1 or whatever it might be, right? Going into some of the details around that. So, I think smart MSPs are seeing this coming, Brian, in terms of the rapid acceleration towards compliance and governance. And the second phase of that will be adding teeth to some of that legislation. With that will come audits. And so smart MSPs today will be taking steps to kind of get their house in order and make sure they have their paperwork trails and all those bits and pieces lined up. And that's something that Augment can help with as well. Our MFA report's a really good example. Fully multi-tenant, breaks everything down. You can drill right into the tenant and user level to say, George Smith has this type of license. He has MFA turned on. He's using Microsoft Authenticator. He's registered for this, and yes, he is protected. So ultimately, if you're my MSP, Brian, in the future, if there's an incident, maybe it's an application for cyber insurance, and they're like, can you prove that George has MFA? You can be like, yep, here's the Augment report. Next question.
Terrific. So we're getting near the end of our time, George. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to share with our audience? And of course, tell us where Augment's going to be over the next few months.
Yeah, for sure. So our next big show will be CompTIA ChannelCon. So super excited to get to that kind of educational event. It's always a great time, and this year down in Atlanta. So I'll be there myself. So if anybody's headed down to Atlanta in Georgia at the end of July, please come by and say hello at the booth. Would love to meet in person. And then after that, we'll also be at Vision 24 down in Texas at the end of August. So the last thing I would mention is we've begun to open up our kind of partner calls. So every month we actually have a partner call that traditionally was just for our paying partners, but we've opened it up to anybody. So if you're interested in Augment and you kind of want to come and skip the whole demo, sales presentation, and just get a feel for what our current partners are saying and asking, maybe get some insight into what we do at a high level, as well as what we're going to be doing on the product roadmap, please look into that. You can sign up on our website under the webinars page.
Terrific. Well, George, I really appreciate you joining us today. Again, anybody that wants to get in touch with George, or get in touch with Augment, you can go straight to their website, augment.com, but also we'll be including George's LinkedIn bio where we post the podcast. The podcast, of course, is available anywhere that you can download your podcast, as well as YouTube. And, we'd love to have you come see the video version as well. But George, I really want to thank you for joining us today. I'll be down at ChannelCon too, so we'll have to make sure we catch up while we're down there. And, really excited to see the things that keep changing over at Augment. I want to thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Brian. Really, really appreciate it. Loving the podcast and all the good things you guys are doing over at VCIO Toolbox as well.
All right, George. So we'll talk soon, and thanks for joining.